Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Alone series discussion. Right now, we're going to be discussing the Alone series, which is done by the History Channel. My original intention was going to be to to actually live stream and discuss these live as I was going, and be able to have like the video playing and have me just talk over it as a commentary. Unfortunately, every time I've tried to do this, I've tried it a couple of different ways. A&E has blocked it, and so I'm going, all right, fine. If they're going to be that picky that they don't want to let me put the video playing while I'm talking over, I literally am talking over the entire thing, and apparently they get finicky about that. That's fine. I will just go ahead and discuss it here live on screen. I'll play the video, so if you guys want to. Loan is currently part of Prime Video. So if you want to go to Amazon Prime, sign up there, and then you can watch Alone with me. I'm starting on season 1, episode 1. I have to go back and record and go through comments again. But I am going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to go ahead and click play right now. All right, so right now it's just playing the little intro for the History Channel. Saying, again, this program is done by survival experts. Don't attempt this program yourself. I love the very first quote they give is Henry David Thoreau talking about living deliberately, being out in the woods. It's a challenge. When you really look at Alone, Alone itself was filmed rather interestingly, to be honest. I gotta make sure my mic's on. Okay, it is. Good. I'm gonna turn the volume down. I can't hear myself speak or think over this. So these guys, there's 10 survivors. If you're not familiar with Alone, there's 10 people they put out. They're all separated by geographical areas where they can't get to each other. They can't team up, and it's a last man standing contest. It's not like Survivor where it's all done by directors. They 100% have to film themselves. They get dropped off at their locations. They all have a satellite phone to allow them to call out. They're very limited in what they can have. They have 10 items. So that's very interesting to kind of watch this. So right now, just watching the current channel, they're flying everybody out. They're taking them out by boat in some locations. Season 1 was filmed on Vancouver Island, which is in British Columbia, Canada. The islands are full of predators. There's lots of bears, mountain lions, and wolves. So just to watch this, I mean, they literally drop them off with their gear, have them film, and then tell them, see ya, we're out of here. And it's literally until you give up. So as they're dropping everybody off, it's interesting to see how they react. Some people are like, "Oh, well, I'm crazy. This is nuts," or some of them are like, "Okay, this is fine." Some of these guys, nobody knows exactly where they're going. They all get dropped off in individual places, so it's interesting to see what everybody does. Some of these guys get rather emotional about it, just the fact that, and they just get really worked up about it. So right now they're talking about they only have 10 tools to survive. You count your clothes. You don't count clothes. You don't count the camera equipment that they give you. But you got 10 items. There's a whole list of things that you can pick from that's allowed and what's not allowed, and certain things like that they get to pick from to go survive with. So they drop everybody off. It's real interesting to see what everybody reacts. I mean, you get some guys who are kind of somber. Sam just got dropped off, and he's like, "Yeah." He's like, Sam's always kind of an interesting person. This little quote he drops there is, "I feel like a mosquito in a nudist colony. So much to do." I'm like, Sam has a good attitude. The guy that just dropped off is like, "Well, we'll have a lot of crying nights." That already sets him up for a bit of negativity. And that's just what I've really noticed, is the attitude people come into this with is a big deal. Everybody's worried about predators. They've got 200 wolves, about 7,000 black bears, and about 1,000 cougars all live on Vancouver Island. Vancouver Island's pretty big, but Mitch is getting dropped off right now. And, he goes, well, sometimes the land rejects you. Again, down to the negativity. This attitude of negativity is just, it's sad sometimes. And then Joe Robinette's just getting dropped off now. He says, he wants to do it. He wants to stay. He wants to win. Joe's got a long YouTube channel, or he has a very big YouTube channel. He does some great videos. He's got like 1 million followers. Josh is they're videoing him. Josh is videoing himself right now. His boat just left. And you can already see him breaking right here. He's already getting emotional. It's interesting because he's literally been left there for 5 minutes. The boat literally just drove off, and he's feeling nauseous, not sure about this. Like, he's already struggling there a bit. And I'm kind of going like, wow, that hit him pretty quick. So right now they're focused in on Josh and his location. So all 10 guys have been dropped off. Vancouver Island is basically a rainforest. So they're all trying to film. They're in super wet conditions. They're all separated either by water or impassable mountains so that they stay completely alone. Right now I'm watching Josh put up his shelter. Looks like he's using, I don't know if it's paracord or what, but I'm watching him try to put this gear up. So he tied a ridge line between 2 trees. He hooked it up on one side, but now he used a bunch of extra rope to tie the other side of the tarp to the ridge line. And that's a lot of extra rope that he really could have set up differently. And he's just saying, I'm in my zone. I've got a shot of winning. I can do this. He's literally set up a very basic lean-to. It's just a tarp running flat, and that's it. He's like, oh, it's temporary. It's 2 or 3 days. And his tarp's small. It looks like it's maybe a 5x8, 6x8. It's real little. He just found some fat wood, which is when all the pine sap and terpenes collect into a branch. And so that's good for starting firewood or starting a fire. So he should be okay. But I'm watching him try to start this. And what he's doing, he's got his whole ferro rod, which is a fire starting device. And he was just nipping it on the end, trying to get it started. And I'm watching him just try to strike this, and he's doing little tiny strokes. I mean, one of the things I'm watching, now he's switched over. Instead of using the scraper, he's using the blade of his hatchet. That, to be honest, it just makes me cringe. That ruins the blade so quickly. I mean, he's literally scraping the blade of his cutting tool. I mean, if you're looking, let's say I take this. I've got a scraper here. And one of the things he's doing is he's scraping forward. And the problem with that is if you got your tinder bundle right here and you scrape forward, you can hit it, knock the tinder bundle, the shavings, whatever you're doing, knock it out, and you're not going to get a spark. The better way to do this is to actually take this is a small ferro rod. I just ordered a bigger one. You can get these at Walmart. Is to take it and pull it back. Because when you pull it back, you get that nice spark on it. And the nice part when you pull back is you're not pushing into that. You're causing it here, and the sparks are flying forward still, but you're not at risk of pushing into that. This is my Cold Steel SRK, and then these were on sale at a Walmart holiday, like $2.50 during Christmas time. So definitely a good buy because it sits on a keychain. So again, getting back to Josh, he's having a little problem and he's feeling paranoid about the animals. It's interesting because he's a law enforcement officer, and in part of his interview, he goes, well, I think I'm good for this. People act like animals, and I'm a law enforcement animal. I'm a law enforcement officer, so I've dealt with people acting like this. And yet, when you actually watch him out here, he's actually saying this right now. He believes he's prepared for this type of scenario. I mean, dealing with people and dealing with animals is entirely different. Even when people are being crazy, he's like, oh, they act like a wild animal. It's really not the same. But his mentality is what he's getting nervous. So he's out scouting, and he got about 30 yards away from camp, about 100 feet, and found some fresh bear scat, a bunch of different fish that the bear had been eating. So when you're just looking at this, I mean, he's got fresh bear sign all over, and when you're looking at how many bears exist on the island, you know what you're going into. So while he keeps walking around, he just found a bear den. It's got fish heads and animals and things in there. And that's the thing. When you really look at what they're doing, it's black bears. It's not like it's grizzlies. They're home to black bears, and black bears are still dangerous, but not nearly as much as grizzlies. So as he's down in the den, he looks up, and the bear's actually up the tree, which is, again, to this point, like, black bears are a little bit more timid, a little bit more scared of new things. So he came towards the den rather than, this is actually a mom with her cubs. And rather than them getting defensive of their den, they ran up the tree to get away from him. And when you're looking at these black bears, he's hauling ass to get out of there. He moved quickly to get out of there, which is a good thing. You don't want to get between the mama bear and her cubs. That's when the black bear will get dangerous. Unless you surprise them, or you get between a mama and her cubs, and then you're screwed. But otherwise, I mean, black bears are pretty timid. You can usually scare them off, or at least redirect them. They're more curious than anything. So now they switched over to Alan. He's from Georgia, so he's used to kind of the swamplands down south. And it's funny. He goes, I don't expect this forest to be so like thick because you can't see anything. And it's funny because they know where they're going to. You think they would research it a little bit. And being from Georgia, I guess I would have assumed he might have some swamps or things around there, but he may not. So he seems pretty well prepared. He's gonna look for a camp. Something he mentions, he's hoping to get fire, but it's a challenge here. Vancouver Island receives so much rain and is so wet. It's literally a rainforest. It's hard to find wet wood. So now they're looking at where Joe's at. Joe's noticing just in the smells. He's pretty much dropped off in a marsh. So you got all of this debris. The water is basically brown from all the tannins. Some statistics just showed up, said Vancouver Island gets almost 13 feet of rain a year. That's a lot of rain to come down. So they dropped him off in a pretty wet place. Looking at the gear he brought out, I mean, that's really the thing here is Joe's got he's called a Primaloft jacket. It looks like it's a down jacket where there's cells and it's kind of puffy in a little bit. The real problem he's got with that is it's not a waterproof material. It actually absorbed a lot of the water, so he's getting wet. And those puffy materials, they're supposed to keep you warm, but usually that fabric can rip and then you're losing that material out of the cells. So that can be really, really difficult to deal with if you're not having something that wicks the water off, especially in a rainforest setting. So Joe's got a little daughter. It's funny, he goes, when I come back, she might be a year older. Alona's never gone an entire year. They claim that it could, and they could be out there for a year. But I know from the other seasons, because I've watched some of the other seasons, the longest current record is 87 days, and that's held by Zachary Fowler. Everybody taps out in less than 3 months in the woods. So it's when they're like, oh, we could be out here a year. it's very highly unlikely that you would be. I mean, it'd have to be a lot of very skilled people to do this. So now they switched over to Lucas. Um, I just got to say, this dude's haircut is terrible. I mean, if you're going out in the woods, I don't know. He knows he's going to be on TV. I guess that's what he likes to do. It just looks messy. It is what it is. I mean, everybody has their own choices, but for me, if I knew I was going out in the woods and potentially going to be there for months, I'd cut my hair real short, knowing it's going to grow out, just to help prevent like having to search for ticks or things like that as early as possible. So he's found some fresh water, so that's going to put him in a good situation. It's funny, he goes, "I'm over the moon," but his face is like totally depressed. So he says he's looking for a few things to sustain his life: shelter, warmth in terms of clothing and fire, water, and then food. So he just found running water, a nice little stream. He'll be able to trace it back, get him some water. So that's going to work out well for him. I think it's interesting when they drop them off, because it really becomes a question of, did they scout these? I don't know if Alone scouted these locations beforehand. I feel like they would have a little bit, because I mean, if you put people in a situation where some of these guys have access to fresh running water and some don't, that really makes, I feel like that makes it a bit unfair, because the people who get water are obviously going to be able to have fresh access to it and maybe be a little easier. So now they're coming back to Josh. Josh has been was on the beach. He's kind of walking around. He's from Ohio, and he just looks real somber. I mean, so as he's walking along the beach, he's finding all these big bear tracks where the bears have walked along the beaches. So he's like, "Oh, day one sucks." So he's like, "I can't." He's complaining, that he can't eat, he can't boil water. He's saying he's afraid to go out and scout because of the animals. He's just terrified of these animals. And here's the deal. Generally speaking, bears really aren't going to eat you. Like, he's got it in his head, and these aren't grizzlies, these aren't big man eaters, these are black bears. So he's just terrified. Anytime there's leaves rustling, he's looking off to the corner. And I get that. That's a mental aspect that I've experienced. And you kind of get that way when you get used to living in the cities and stuff. You hear stuff move in the woods, and the sad part is it could be something as simple as a squirrel. Squirrels rustle the leaves or make things move, or a rabbit runs through, and you're really scared of nothing. Well, you can see it just playing in his mind and then going over it again and again and being concerned about it. Cougars generally won't hunt a person. We're not on the food chain for bears and cougars unless they have no other options. Usually when you look at the cougar attacks that do happen on people, it's because somebody's running or biking or moving at a very quick pace, and it triggers the cougar to go, "Oh, I'm going to chase whatever that is. Something's moving fast. I'm going to chase it, and I'm going to kill it." And so it's an instinct thing where it's really, if you're walking slowly, you're making noise, you're talking, they're going to avoid you for the most part. They might get a little curious, but they'll avoid you. So, I mean, I look at where these guys have the opportunity to build some shelters. Everybody keeps saying, the bears are concerned. The bears are concerned. But there's ways you can mitigate this. When I'm looking at a lot of these guys, I mean, get some shelters set up, get some fire going. The fire alone is going to be a bear deterrent. I mean, they're going to avoid that for the most part. So looks like they're all like 7 to 10 miles away from each other, give or take. Now they've kind of come back to Joe Robinet. He's been spending an hour trying to bushwhack it. So he's going through all this different brush. And he finally just found a game trail. And the game trails are cool. I really like, I love hiking game trails. The main reason for that is you get to find out how animals use the environment. They use it regularly. So game trails usually are going to lead to either food, water, or where they're bedding down and taking shelter. You obviously don't want to camp right on the game trail because then you're going to have visitors. But he's looking for someplace kind of off the trail where he can do it. Because the nice part about the trail will allow him to move around a lot quicker than trying to just go through the brush. So Joe's got a 10 by 10 tarp, which looks bigger. So he's going to set himself up a ridge line and do an A-frame shelter tent. And the A-frames are good. I mean, it's good because it gives you shelter from the rain. The only thing, there's a couple things. Again, being in animal country, my concern would be twofold. One, if the rain, even in an A-frame shelter, you're only protected from two directions. If the wind switches and comes through either the front or the back, you're still going to be cold. If these guys go ahead, so here's something interesting that Joe's actually doing that I didn't see Josh doing. Joe actually set himself up with the proper knots on the ridge line that gives him a properly stretched out tension. He's not using any extra real cordage other than what's on the ridge line. And then he was able to stake it out in an A-frame. So an A-frame's decent enough shelter for a first night. Again, my only concern from an animal perspective is you got front and back open. So while you are protected on the sides and you can protect yourself, say you got two bears who come in or a pack of wolves or something, it can be real easy to be watching one corner, and even cougars are quiet. So if you are going to get attacked by an animal, the cougar could come in your back door and grab you before you had a chance to see it because you could only watch one direction. You don't have people being able to watch them all. So I'd be a little more inclined to do a plow point shelter, which is where you stake one corner down and then the other two corners down, and then it comes up to the top. So it still gives you that kind of A-frame, but it gives you only one direction the wind could actually hit you from. It gives you protection in your back and your side, so you've only got the front for security. So just looking at this, everybody got dropped off pretty quick the first day, like right before dark. So they're all scrambling to try to find a place to get their tarps up. Some of the shelters are just, there's not a whole lot of tension. Joe, I think so far has put up the best shelter. His tarp was taut across the top. He's staked out good. So I'm looking at Wayne's shelter right now. Wayne's shelter literally looks like it was just draped over a branch or something. It's pretty like wavy and just kind of hanging around him. When you look at the video, the shelter's like right here versus Joe has his staked out. He's got room. And the nice part about that, if you got your shelter right here and a bear wants to come check you out, that bear to come check you out is going to be right here. So in looking at Joe's, they switched back to Joe. He goes, I didn't get a lot done. Everybody's feeling kind of hungry and thirsty. Joe in particular is wet and cold, and he can't get a fire going because of the wetness. And I mean, he got his coat. Like I said, his coat absorbed a lot of moisture through all the brush he was walking through. And that's just kind of a problem for him. So he switched back to Josh, and he can hear he heard something cracking. The game camera actually caught the first thing that's moving is a mouse, just kind of moving through the brush. So not really too much of a worry. But now there's a growl, and you can kind of see he's got a bear moved in. And looking at it, it's actually the mama bear that he walked in on her den 100 feet away or however far away it was, that she's come to check out who's new in the neighborhood. And that's really looking at her. She's sniffing. She's worked around the back side of his little lean-to. And again, in a lean-to configuration, it's a straight up. So A-frame, you've got front and back. Lean-to, you literally have the back protecting you if it was coming this way, and sides and front are completely open. He's got nothing protecting him on either side. Looking at the game camera, it's actually it's the baby and her mama. And so he does the right thing. He grabs the bear spray, but he didn't shoot it. He just goes, "Hey bear," and the black bears take off. Like that's the thing. Like, black bears are pretty timid, especially if they've got a baby. They're not going to stay around and screw around because they don't want their babies to die. So they were just curious, and he's like, "Oh, I heard him leave," and he's just concerned. I mean, you look at this video; they both came along the backside, but he goes, "I'm scared to death. I don't know." He's like, "Oh, I'm being stalked right now." To be honest, it just doesn't sound like he spent a lot of time out in the woods or near a bear, because that's not stalking. This bear was literally curious about him and just to find out, what's the deal. And you see him just trying to hold it together and not cry. I feel for him because it is unnerving to get that close to a bear. But again, they took off right when he said, "Hey bear." He literally shouted one time, and both the mom and her baby got the hell out of Dodge. They're more just checking the area. So I mean, he really let this get in his head. He said, he's sleeping. He's got his axe for a weapon. Some of the items they can pick, and this is really interesting to me, that a lot of these contestants on this first season did not seem to pick a bow. And it's funny because you think about protection, you need some type of protection. You're going to Vancouver Island where there's all these bears and all these wolves. I would ensure, just for myself, one of the first priorities with getting the shelter up is making sure I'm in a defensible position. So it's funny. He goes, "Oh, this was something I was doing just for fun." I mean, it's $500,000. And he just, I don't want to be there, and this is crap. And his attitude towards this, it literally sounds, he's like, "I'm not going to be stalked." You're not being stalked by a mama and her cubs. That's not stalking. And to me, just looking at this, I mean, he's calling it quits for sure. But it's just, he really let the animals get into his head on day one. I mean, when they said that they dropped him off within a couple hours of the sun going down, he was there not even 24 hours. And he already called the rescue boat and was the first guy to tap out. He's like, I can't take a chance. I can't do this. I mean, to me, when I see this, these guys are probably, who dropped him off, are going, "You quit after a day?" That's what I'd be thinking if I dropped him off. I'm like, really? It's a day? And I mean, he's getting emotional about it and feeling disappointed. But to me, he goes, "I don't know what else to do." You know what? If you're where a bear found you, day 2 is bug out. Go find another location. Go scout out. Get away from where you're at. You don't have to sit right where they dropped you off. You're allowed to move around and do things. So I'd go look for another place. I mean, he's got all day to go look and set up a new shelter, get away from it. I mean, now he's walking off crying because he can't take it. Which is funny because when he first got dropped off, he was acting kind of tough. "I'm a law enforcement officer. I can do this." And yet he just backed off. I don't know. It's funny. Even there he goes, "I'm a cop. I've done a lot of stuff, but there's nothing at all like that to experience what I felt." And there's that primal fear. But that's part of this experience, is being able to keep that capacity of where you are, I guess, to keep your mental faculties about you and deal with nature. He dealt with it properly. The bear left, and he could relocate the next day or figure something out. I mean, that's what he would do. So now they've moved over to Chris. Chris is from Florida. Chris almost has a plow point. He actually has an A-frame, but the way his A-frame was set up, looking at his shelter, he used a log or a pole as his ridgeline, and he ran it apparently from the ground up to something. So he's wrapped an A-frame, but he actually does have almost a plow point shelter. The back is still open, but it's a foot and a half open versus if you had a full normal A-frame, it'd be a lot more open, and that would be concerning. So right now, he's trying to chop firewood. He chopped down a tree. Then he started chopping a branch overhead of himself, and he hit it, and it came down and hit him right here. I mean, man, if you just that kind of thing right there is one of those sad mistakes that could take you out of this game. I mean, he literally just dropped a tree on himself. That could have broken his collarbone. Had that come over a little more, could have hit him in the head. He could be bleeding. Got a concussion. Like that could have been really, really bad. He got lucky that it just took him right on the shoulder, and looks like he took the hit pretty well. But I love his saw. He's actually got one of those. He's got a saw that it's made out of wood. It's got two frames, and then it's got a frame across the middle. The saw goes along the bottom side, and the top you tension it by twisting a piece of wood in the rope, twisting it around. It tensions everything together, and then you just lock that piece of wood through the handle, and it holds it together. It's a nice saw. It's very compact, so that's pretty cool. I mean, he comes out of Florida, so his concern right now is feeling defenseless. And again, this comes down to me, you could at least get some primitive weapons going. I mean, it's not that hard to get some spears. I mean, where they've got hatchets and axes and stuff, I'd at least get, I mean, if you're going to be there, stake out. It'd take you a couple hours of work, but you could do that whole stake out of putting like stakes with almost spear points on them in like a poked out position from your entryway, and only have the small path that you could get through, which is the small path the bear or animal could get through, which gives you a lot more defensibility. He doesn't have, outside of his axe and his knife, he's not carrying any weapons. So he goes, one of his biggest concerns, he got attacked by a German Shepherd, so he's his concerns appear to be less bears and more the wolves that are on the island. And there's 200 wolves on the island. That's a pretty good amount. But again, Vancouver Island's huge. These guys are spread out over a geographic area that's probably 20 to 30 miles, maybe. So they're over a very small part of Vancouver Island. But, I mean, it's a concern for him. It's a concern for everybody. Well, wolves are, to me, a little bit more scary than a bear. A bear is a single one. Generally, you can scare a bear off. Wolves, if they want to attack you, they generally won't. Wolves are super skittish. And this is one of those things, again. Wolves are... I own wolves, and I raise them. And a wolf, especially in I raise high content wolves they're skittish. They are very concerned about anything. We moved a trash can into our backyard, and the wolf wouldn't go outside because she wasn't sure what the new thing was. They are very much wanting to avoid anything new. So they're probably going to avoid the people for the most part. They might check them out from a distance, but they're not going to want to get close. So here they switch back to Alan. Alan's trying to process some firewood. He's got a folding buck saw. What's interesting to me is he's sawing a big log like this. And that's going to be one of the hardest ways to get firewood. That's a lot of calories that go into it. And this is something, I actually learned this from Corporal's Corner, Sean Kelly. It's a YouTube channel. And one of the things, if you can get smaller pieces of wood, you can stick them through a tree that's got a Y branch or two trees that are close enough to each other. And anything up to 3-4 inches, you can get good leverage on and snap into the size of firewood you want. You don't need to spend the energy sitting there sawing and putting all that muscle and calories into that. That's that's a real problem. I've seen a few of these guys doing this when they're sawing stuff. I'm like, I'd take a different approach to it. So a lot of these guys, they're and nobody's getting fire. Everybody's wood's wet. They're struggling. They can't get it lit. Some of what I'm looking at, some of these guys, I feel like they're using too big of pieces. Brant actually is on the screen right now, and he's got old man's beard, which is a type of moss. It looks like his is dried out, and so that stuff should light okay. I mean, he probably needs to again put it all together, tinder it up, make it into a good little bird's nest. But again, everything's wet, so you got to get small stuff that's dry to get started. But again, he's still doing the same thing. He's holding it and he's moving into it, which is really easy to knock it off. So even if you got a spark, it wouldn't take. He just did it. He just about knocked it off the wood. And again, it's that you put the knife there and you pull back rather than pushing the knife into the tinder to get a better spark. Again, that's another Corporal's Corner tip. It's just good to know that. A lot of people think, oh, I need to strike it. You need to pull the striker away from it. So now they switch back to Mitch. Mitch has spent most of the day out and doing some exploring. Looks like he's lucky. He's from Massachusetts, so he was familiar with this, and he actually came up with some mussels. They're a little small, almost like a clam. They're in a shell. Mussels look great. And then the other thing he looks like he picked up was some little snails. I guess they're called periwinkles. So, I mean, generally, from what you're going to do with these, you would boil them or steam them to cook them. For me, I'd boil them for a couple reasons. One, you're going to purify your water. Two, you're not going to leave anything. You'll get some calcium leached out from the shells. That'll be good. And that's what I just do. So I switch back to Sam. Sam's howling, and this is why I love Sam. This is awesome. He howls, and the wolf howls back, and he howls, and he's like, this is so awesome. And it's just his attitude. Like, he's not concerned about the wolves. He's actually calling to them, which could be considered very high risk. I mean, when you're really thinking about it, it's funny because then they just switch to Mitch. Mitch heard the wolf howling and goes, what the hell was that? Like, that gets his attention. It gets everybody's attention that the wolves are out. Sam just thinks it's cool. A wolf can be heard from up to 10 miles away. I mean, howling is how they communicate and know where each other is. So him howling, technically, he could call the wolves into him. Like, they could be like, oh, the wolf's over there. I'm going to go see that wolf. And end up in his camp. But he just thinks it's cool. Mitch is like, oh, well, it's starting to get dark. The sun's going down. I can hear wolves. I'm concerned. I need to get some fire. So he's picking up some little smaller stuff, and I think that's good. Again, he complains the same thing everybody else does. I don't have a bow. I don't have anything. I just have my knife. And I know one of the contestants has a bow, so I know bows were allowed. I don't remember who has one. But it's just one of those things that you're like, it's like, well, I hope the wolves don't come here. You got to do something to prepare yourself. They've got rope. They could quickly fashion a survival bow or an atlatl or anything like that. One of the survival weapons I would fashion that would actually work and probably scare, if you got a wolf at a distance, or even you could potentially piss a bear off, but even at that distance, I know that there's, and you'd have to practice with this to get good, but it's an old-fashioned shepherd sling. Now, there's Afghani little shepherd boys who are 10, 12, 15 years old who are pros at using this and can kill animals or kill people. And they can whip it real fast, real hard. This would be really easy for them to fashion and pick up some rocks to be able to have something that if a wolf gets within, a couple 100 yards, you could let loose with rocks and that would get their attention that, and even if you hit one, if you hit a wolf with a rock, they're not going to come after you. They're going to get the hell out of there. And this would be easy. I mean, they've got rope, they've got paracord. You could gut this first. I obviously didn't, but you could pull the strings out so you got a lace. And this little bit right here, you can have a normal full pouch, but I've actually found those lose the rocks from time to time. So 2 little strips of leather actually work better. And I'll do a video on how to put these together and how to use one. The nice part is it can be real small and hold on to a small rock. It can spread out and be bigger and hold on to a pretty big sized rock that you could do quite a bit of damage with and sling pretty accurately. And this, you could do this out of cloth. You could do this out of a belt. So everybody's out there with their belts. And when you think about a belt and you knock it up, there's always that tail end of a belt. These guys out here are going to be getting skinnier. They're not going to be getting fatter. So the belt's going to actually move in more, not out. They're not going to be getting bigger. So that actually is extra leather. You could actually cut that off, cut a slit going from hole to hole to hole and cut it all and get the 2 strips. So this alone would give you a primitive weapon, something that you could at least gather some stones, have them in your pocket or your bag or whatever you need to have them nearby. So I'm watching Mitch. He's trying to get a fire. He created a bunch of feather sticks, which is where you take wood and you shave it very thinly. Puts all the shavings together. That's a good way to get it it dries out pretty quickly. It also catches fire quickly, and he's got fire. So day 2, Mitch now has a little bit of a fire. That's going to give him some good protection. It's going to make him feel better. It's going to keep him warm, dry out his stuff. And so that's going to work to his advantage right there that he's got that. So that's going to be a big deal, and he's been able to make fire. So the feather sticks do work. They do catch fire. They're really, really advantageous. So he's sitting there. His shelter leaves a little bit to be desired. It's an open shelter. Looking at it, it's another one of those where it's just the tarp. It's the lean-to configuration where it's just the tarp on the back ends and it's a straight flat surface. His isn't even tensioned though. Like, it's very loose and hangs down. So if rain or wind came in, I'd be concerned about what had happened to his shelter. So he looks like I think it's hard to tell if he boiled the mussels or roasted them. Roasting them would give them a nice smoky flavor, but so he just ate the periwinkles. He goes, "Oh, I love those. They're good. Mussels are great. I love mussels." So he's gotten some calories in him, which is good. I mean, like I said, smoking them would allow it to be, or smoking and roasting these things would give it a bit more flavor. But I still go for boiling them because you get all the nutrients. You wouldn't lose anything. I mean, if you're smoking a little mussel that big and it loses some moisture, it's going to lose some nutrients. It's going to lose some fat, or whatever fat's in it will probably drip out. Where if you boil the meat, the fat's going to stay in there. It's going to stay in the broth and everything, and that'll be a better way to get all of that back into you. So that's kind of the route I would have taken. I don't know if that's what he did. He didn't show that. So the wolves are still howling. That's concerning him. They've gone back over to Chris, another 7 miles. So again, these guys are all about 7 miles away from each other. So Chris can hear the wolves howling too. I mean, they're all pretty close. It's funny. He goes, "Shit, it's dark." He's from Florida. So when you think about Florida is a little more flat. And when they showed his home, he's out near some like pastures and stuff. So the moon's going to be bright. When you're out in the forest, even with the full moon, it's going to be dark. He goes, "You can't see the wolves. You're not going to be able to see them in the dark." Like that's kind of why they do that. And he goes, "They're so loud." And for Chris, it's a problem because he got attacked by a German Shepherd when he was young. So he's got this fear of dogs. So hearing the wolves I think that's getting to him. But right there, actually in this clip, they show there's a tree that got busted. So you've got the tree upright with just a broken off point. And I was like, that's a good spot to go get some wood. But so now they're down to 9 guys. Looks like this is the end. They're talking about the next couple episodes. So I hope you guys like this. I apologize that we can't actually watch the video together to talk about this stuff. I need to find some way either around that, or I'm probably just going to have to do these live commentaries. Go ahead and watch the videos with me. But yep, that's kind of what we're going to do. We're going to move on to episode 2 and post that next week. Thank you everybody for watching, and we will all see you later.